up? Welcome back once again to the Necro Zoo. I am Boom. And in this one, let's go ahead and add one more figure to my McFarlane DC Multiverse collection. Now, today we will take a look at our second figure from the Crisis on Infinite Earths wave. Now, I already did the Superman, and this time we will take a look at Wally West, Kid Flash. Now, in all honesty, this is going to be pretty crazy because a lot of things I did not like about this figure, but there are some interesting details and a couple of things that I actually did enjoy. Now, there is going to be some inaccuracies here, and there's going to also be some pretty cool, interesting things. So, he does look pretty heroic in the packaging, but let's go ahead and take a closer look at him. But first, he does come with your standard black DC Multiverse stand. Now, of course, these are not really needed, but sometimes they do come in useful. He also comes with his data file card. On the front, you do have an image of Kid Flash Wally West. Now, I definitely have to point out that the version that they have on the card is not the little kid Wally West. This one does look a little bit more adolescent. I would have to say even like a young man. But there is a difference, a discrepancy, and that is that he looks a lot more lanky and leaner, like a long distance runner's physique. While if you look at the figure, he definitely is a little bit more bulky and has more of like a sprinter's body. So, although some people are saying that this should be like a little imp size figure, that is not necessarily true because just look at the image on the card and you can tell that that is not a 10-year-old Wally West. This looks more like, maybe even looks more like a 17-year-old Wally West, but we'll get more into that as we do some comparisons. Now, on the back, you do have some information. Pretty cool. We'll add that to the collection. Now, he does come with some accessories. Of course, per usual, I like to review the figures with two fists, so I have him with two fists. But he does come with these really tiny running hands, really small. You can see that that's why a lot of people online were already pointing that out, and that is that both of the sets of hands are really small, especially for this body. They may have looked better on a leaner buck, but for this body, they just do not work. Now, surprisingly, I found the easiest fix, and it is on a recent figure, but I'll show that towards the end, where I got some alternate hands for this Kid Flash. But we will hold on to these. You never know where we could use these little tiny running hands. And then, of course, he also comes with the legs for the monitor. Now, one thing I did notice right away is this kind of tells me that the monitor is not really going to be that big. He's going to be an average humanoid size. I think in the comics, though, he is just your typical size. He's not big or anything like the anti-monitor is supposed to be. So these are fine, and we'll definitely hold on to these to build that monitor. Now let's run through this really quick and take a closer look at the figure. First impressions, I can tell you right away. Once again, this is the Blue Beetle and Booster Gold Buck. Now, they did reuse that body before when they did the Barry Allen Flash from the Flashpoint. So I could recognize it right away just by certain details. And although it is the same body book, one thing I did notice while looking at the figure is there are some very unassuming differences. Very small, but I will point them out. These little differences actually do correlate with this being the Wally West version of Kid Flash. But in all honesty, I have to say, It's a nice looking figure. Now, we do know that in the end, these figures were originally thought to be going into the toy aisles. Now, they didn't make it to there, so they ended up making a smaller quantity than if they would have gone nationwide with these figures. In all honesty, I can see somebody walking down the toy aisle and seeing this Flash character and thinking, oh, it's a pretty cool looking Flash character. Not not necessarily knowing the history behind Kid Flash Wally West, but it does have a cool look to it with the contrasting red and yellow. Of course, they painted on the emblem, but that is traditional for your Kid Flash figures that we have received before. But it is still a little bit jarring. The silhouette that he cuts and the shape of the body is a little bit bulky to be even a teen Wally West. Now, of course, I got this in the bundle, so this guy ended up costing me about $32. But if you were to buy him on his own on the website, he will probably come out to about $44 or $46, something like that. But as always, I did know what I was getting into by picking up this wave. So much so that I even ordered two of them. But as I said before, for all intents and purposes, really nice, sleek looking Flash character, but not necessarily coming through with the Kid Flash Wally West look. But it is what it is. Let's take a closer look at the head sculpt. Now, I really do like the head sculpt, but I am a super big fan of the original Wally West that they gave us when he used that alternate costume. That head sculpt is awesome. This one is pretty good, but it's not as great as the first one. But he does have his own look to him, and maybe it'll grow on me the more, time passes. They did do a nice job on the hair. I really like the way it flows coming out over the half mask and getting into the facial features and the design of the mask. Pretty cool. You got those red fins on the side. Pretty, pretty nice head sculpt. Now he does have good articulation. You can look down pretty well. Could look up an exorbitant amount, and that is good for running poses. You got right to left. And of course, you could tilt his head for some character. A little bit of attitude there for Wally West. Now, as I said before, I won't go through all of the articulation because, of course, we've seen this before already a lot of times. But you do got that great waist articulation. He has above average crunch, but that goes with all of the figures that use this book. And of course, you could lean them back. Good. Got awesome range in the shoulder. Really smooth movement between the bushing and the socket that allows you to cover that gap between the shoulder and the collar and still gives you a lot of movement. Pretty nice. Now, the first big thing we're going to notice right away is these little bitty hands. And what I ended up noticing that I didn't know is that they're not even the same hand. Like one hand is bigger than the other, and then the paint is different. This one has sort of like a satin red, while this one has like a glossy red. And if you look at them from the side, you could see that this right hand is a little bigger than the left little hand. So definitely not cool. I mean, don't know, why that happened or how that happened. As I said before, I did find a really quick fix for those hands. Let's take a look at the lower body. Looks pretty good. You got all the articulation you need. You got thigh swivel, move the boot from side to side, kick up, kick back, move the rubber trunks. And when you go back, they go back to their original shape. Cock out his leg. He does have double jointed knees, up and down at the ankle, right to left, rocker, toe articulation. All in all, the same thing we have seen before from this body book. But let's get into the boots now. I just thought there was something different about these boots, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And right away, I remembered that the Barry Allen Flash had a sort of like marbling in the boots. And this one is just a solid one color of plastic. So that kind of tipped me off to like, what's the difference between the boots? But we'll take a look at that right now with some comparisons. If you look at him from the bottom, no tread, but he does have some identifying marks. Up the back, not too much anything in scope work. I do enjoy the broad back that the Beetle Buck has. Love the thickness of it, although kind of doesn't work with this character, but for what it is really nice looking, pretty interesting. But anyways, nice looking figure, like I said, but the inaccuracy and then the little tiny hands are just not cool. I am happy to have them for the collection. Definitely not going to be one of my favorites. Now, you can pop off his hand really simply and put in those, tiny running hands. I mean, not much better than the other ones, but I guess I'll go ahead and talk about the alternate hands now. First, I found these hands and I couldn't figure out what figure they were for. I was like, I know they're a recent figure, but what are, what are they? And when I found out who they were, I got the fist out, and you know who it is? It is Red Tornado. Now, surprisingly, the peg is exactly the same. So if you pop on the fist, they fit perfectly. You do not have to modify the pegs. They fit exactly the same. Now, the red is almost exactly matching, so it's not that far off where it's passable that these hands actually fit pretty close. You could add a touch of a little bit lighter red just to match it a little bit better, but in all actuality, I'm actually fine with it just like this. Now, this really makes the figure for some reason. He looks great with these fists. Of course, you could slap on these hands, which are like open hands. You could heat them up and glue them to make them more of like running hands, but I think they actually work fine with this figure. And of course, another thing you could do is actually pop out one of the fists and then just have alternate hands, like one sort of running hand and then one fist. Get them in some cool poses. So that actually works really well. Now, another thing I did is as soon as I knew I was going to do this, I went on Target's website and I ordered another Red Tornado. Right now it's $19.99. And since I can actually pose one with the fist, the other Red Tornado with his open hands, that means I will actually have two sets of hands left over, and they're actually going to be used for this Kid Flash. Definitely, I have no problem with that. And as I said, they make the figure. Once you switch the hands, he actually looks a lot cooler for some reason. And I know it's going above and beyond because, we shouldn't have to do that. But it's just as simple as looking into my hand fodder when I found these hands. So, in all actuality, it doesn't really bother me at all. I had been planning to buy another Red Tornado because I wanted to paint it a more classic yellow where they painted it gold. And this just gave me more reason to go ahead and pull the trigger and buy that other Red Tornado. So these hands are actually awesome. Really like the way he looks now. Those hands really make a big difference. Now, you could get him in a lot of cool poses. He's really posable. So you can eventually end up having a lot of fun with him. He'll probably be good in figure photography. Now, I do have the older Mattel figures, I actually have the DC Universe Classics Wally West. Now, this one is more of a version of like a younger, like an early teen. I'd have to say about 15 years old. But I also have the Young Justice version, which is also a really nice looking figure. Now, they basically use the same body, but they do have a couple of stylized differences. Now, when it comes to DC Multiverse, I actually like this leaner Wallace West Kid Flash, and I even swapped his head onto this body, and man, that makes a big difference. Now, this makes him look more like the card art, where he's like a lankier speedster, but the head is a little bit large. But besides the costume details that won't match with him, I really think McFarlane should have just went with this body. I, for one, would be more happy with him. If he would have went with this leaner John Kent body instead of going with this very bulky Blue Beetle. Now, the one that did use that Blue Beetle book was the Flashpoint Barry Allen. So you could see they're basically the same body, but with slight differences. Now, what I did notice was that if you look at the boots, they are completely different. Aside from the plastic that they're molded out of, the like little fins on the wingtips of the boots, where the Barry Allen one just has like a solid little wingtip. And there's a little bit of wrinkle difference also in the boots. In fact, I honestly think these boots would look better on the Flashpoint Flash, but I'm not gonna deal with that. It is what it is. I'm gonna leave it like that. And if you go up to the head, you also see that the wingtips on the head is different. Where this one has a little bit of flair to it. These are just solid little wingtips. So I would have not have noticed that unless I really took a comparison look at all these figures. But at the end of the day, what I said still stands. He is a cool speedster character, not necessarily representing what we know in the comics. But if you do put the Barry Allen and the Wally West together, they do look pretty awesome. So, in all honesty, not a big fan of this figure. He may grow on me a little bit more. The hand swap really makes a big difference on this figure. But I will actually be moving on to the next figure in the wave. But you guys keep hunting out there, keep collecting, keep customizing, and I will see you on the next one.
They used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.